The most sophisticated heating system ever built cost its engineers nothing. No electricity, no gas, no moving parts. And it kept marble floors at 85 degrees Fahrenheit in the middle of a European winter 2,000 years ago. The engineers who designed it didn't have a patent. They didn't sell it. They didn't put it behind a paywall or brand it with a logo. They just understood physics. And because of that, an entire civilization stayed warm in stone buildings without a single propane canister, without a single battery, without a single piece of equipment that could fail them at 2 a.m. in a blizzard. That system was the Roman hypocaust, and the survival industry has been hoping you never learn how it actually works, because the moment you do, you realize that the $700 heating solution they've been selling you is a fundamentally inferior technology designed by people who understand marketing far better than they understand thermodynamics. Right now, somewhere in a survival store, there's a $700 ceramic catalytic heater sitting on a shelf next to a $400 emergency thermal blanket system, and the guy behind the counter will tell you that's what you need to survive the cold. He'll use words like output rating and BTU capacity, and he'll make it sound like survival heating is a solved problem, one that just happens to cost several $100s to access. The whole industry operates on a simple lie. That heat generation requires expensive proprietary technology, that without the right gear, the right fuel, the right brand, you're helpless against the cold. It's a remarkably effective lie because cold is genuinely deadly. Hypothermia kills faster than most people realize. Your core temperature drops just 3.6 degrees and your coordination starts failing. Drop it 7 degrees and you lose consciousness. The fear is real, but the solution being sold to you is not the best. A T1 available. It's just the most profitable one. The retail survival industry needs you to believe that ancient physics-based solutions are too primitive to be effective. They need you dependent on products, on fuel, on replaceable components. Because the moment you understand what the Romans understood, you stop needing them entirely. Here's what that salesman doesn't understand, or pretends not to. Heat is not a substance you buy, it's energy in motion. And the physics governing how it moves hasn't changed since the Romans figured it out. There are 3 mechanisms of heat transfer: conduction, convection, and radiation. Most modern survival heaters exploit convection. They heat air. And here's the fundamental problem with that. Air has almost no thermal mass. The specific heat capacity of air is about 0.24 BTUs per pound per degree Fahrenheit. That sounds like a number, so let me make it mean something. Air is extraordinarily bad at holding heat. The moment your heater stops running, the warm air stratifies, rises, escapes through every gap in your shelter, and within 15 to 20 minutes, your space is cold again. You've been paying for a heating system that works only while it's actively burning fuel. The second the fuel runs out, you're back to zero. The Romans identified this problem 2,000 years ago, and they solved it with a concept called thermal mass. Thermal mass is the ability of a material to absorb heat, store it, and release it slowly over time. Stone, brick, clay, and dense earth have specific heat capacities that are 4 to 10 times higher than air. Concrete sits at roughly 0.23 BTUs per pound per degree. Dense stone is around 0.22. But here's what matters. A 20-pound rock has roughly 83 times more heat storage capacity than the same volume of air. You charge it with heat for an hour, and it gives that heat back to you for the next 6 hours. That is a thermal battery. That is what the Romans built into the floors and walls of their bathhouses and villas. The hypocaust system worked by circulating hot gases through hollow spaces beneath stone floors and inside hollow walls. The stone absorbed the heat, and then for hours after the fire died down, that stone radiated warmth at a steady, reliable rate into the living space. No fuel dependency, no convective loss, just physics storing and releasing energy on a predictable schedule. The scientific principle at work here is called radiant heat transfer. Unlike convection, radiant heat doesn't require air movement. It operates through electromagnetic radiation in the infrared spectrum. Your body absorbs it directly. Think about sitting near a campfire versus sitting in a warm room. Near the campfire, even on a cold night, you feel genuinely warm on the side facing the fire. That's radiant heat hitting your skin directly, regardless of the air temperature around you. The Romans weaponized this effect at an architectural scale. and you can replicate the core physics of it for under $5. A modern catalytic propane heater weighs 6 pounds, costs between $180 and $700, requires proprietary fuel canisters that run out at exactly the wrong moment, and produces convective heat, meaning the second you stop feeding it fuel, your warmth disappears. A standard 1-pound propane canister runs a typical survival heater for approximately 3 to 6 hours at a mid-level setting and costs between $4 and $8. So if you're running that heater through a 10-hour cold night, you're burning through 2 to 3 canisters just to survive one night. That's $8 to $24 in fuel per night, assuming you can find canisters. In a prolonged emergency, supply chains break down, stores run out, prices spike. The retail survival industry has built you a solution that requires a constant resupply chain to function, which is precisely the opposite of what a genuine survival tool should be. Compare that to a thermal mass heat battery. The materials cost under $5 total. They weigh less than the propane heater. They require no proprietary fuel. They cannot run out. They cannot malfunction. There are no moving parts to break. There is no fuel line to clog. The physics that make it work were established approximately 13.8 billion years ago when the universe set the laws of thermodynamics, and those laws have not been updated since. The survival industry doesn't sell you this solution because there's no recurring revenue in it. You buy the materials once, you understand the physics once, and then you never need to buy it again. That's a terrible business model. It's an outstanding survival strategy. Here's how you build a functional thermal mass heat battery for under $5 in materials using the exact thermodynamic principle the Romans engineered into their architecture. You need 4 things: a metal container, a large tin can, a small cast iron pot, or even a thick-walled steel box. Dense stones or bricks that fit inside or surround your container, a small heat source capable of burning for 60 to 90 minutes, and an optional clay or sand layer for modulating heat release. Start by selecting your thermal mass material. River stones work exceptionally well because they're dense, smooth, and free. Bricks are ideal if you have them. A single standard clay brick weighs about 4.5 pounds and holds roughly 0.9 BTUs per degree Fahrenheit of temperature change. If you heat that brick from 70 degrees to 300 degrees, a 230-degree rise, it stores approximately 207 BTUs of thermal energy. Release that over 6 hours and you're getting a sustained radiant output of about 34 BTUs per hour. That's not a blazing inferno, but it's enough to raise the temperature of a small insulated space by 15 to 20 degrees above ambient, and it will do so continuously and silently for the entire release period. Now here's the critical step the Romans understood: surface area and containment geometry. You don't want your thermal mass to release heat all at once. You want it metered, controlled, consistent. If you pack your heated stones into a metal container and wrap that container in a thin layer of clay or sand, just a 1/4 inch, you slow the emission rate and extend your heat curve from 2 hours down to 5 or 6 hours. The clay acts as a thermal resistor, the same way insulation works in your walls, but in reverse. Instead of keeping cold out, it's metering heat release outward at a controlled rate. To charge your thermal mass, you use your small heat source, a candle, a small alcohol stove, a tea light cluster, or a small contained fire if you're outdoors. Place your stones or brick directly in or over the heat source for 60 to 90 minutes. You're not trying to get them glowing red. You want them hot enough that you cannot hold your hand against them for more than 2 seconds. That corresponds to a surface temperature of roughly 140 to 180 degrees Fahrenheit, which is the ideal range for sustained low-level radiant emission. Once charged, move your thermal mass to the center of your sleeping area or shelter. The radiant heat will begin immediately. For maximum efficiency, position your body within 3 to 4 feet of the thermal mass and use a reflective barrier, even aluminum foil wrapped around a cardboard panel, on the opposite side to redirect radiant energy back toward you. This effectively doubles your heat capture without adding any energy to the system. If you have multiple stones or bricks, stagger their charging times. Charge one set while the other is releasing. You now have a continuous, rotating thermal battery system that requires nothing but a small flame to maintain indefinitely. Independent thermal testing of small-scale masonry heat batteries, essentially what you just built, shows sustained radiant output of 4 to 6 hours after a 90-minute charge cycle using stones in the 5 to 8 pound range. Military cold weather survival manuals. Specifically, the U.S. Army FM 2176 Survival Field Manual document the use of heated stone sleeping systems in northern climates as a primary cold weather survival technique. Indigenous peoples across Siberia, Scandinavia, and North America used heated stone sleeping platforms for centuries before any retail survival product existed. The Mongolian yurt heating system uses a central thermal mass principle, a metal stove surrounded by stone or clay that continues radiating heat hours after the fire burns down to coals. These are not primitive techniques. They are sophisticated applications of thermodynamic principles that happen to use inexpensive materials. A 10-pound river stone heated to 200 degrees Fahrenheit and placed in an insulated sleeping environment will raise the radial temperature within a 4-foot sphere by approximately 12 to 18 degrees Fahrenheit over a 5-hour release period. That is the difference between a sleeping temperature of 28 degrees, the onset of serious hypothermia risk, and 40 to 46 degrees, which is cold but survivable with basic insulation. It is a meaningful, potentially life-saving temperature differential, and it costs you $0 if you use rocks you find on the ground. Even if you buy the materials, a tin can, a few bricks, a box of tea lights, you're at $4 to $6 total. That's not a survival expense, that's a rounding error. And unlike the $700 heater, it will never fail you because it has no mechanism to fail. The Romans didn't have Amazon Prime. They didn't. They'd have a survival gear influencer telling them what to buy. They had physics, and they used it so effectively that we're still finding their heated floors intact 2 millennia later. What you've just learned is not a trick or a hack or a clever workaround. It's a fundamental understanding of how heat energy behaves in the physical world. You know now that thermal mass stores energy. You know that radiant heat transfers without air movement. You know that specific heat capacity determines how long a material holds what you put into it. You know that charging a thermal battery for 90 minutes can give you 5 to 6 hours of sustained warmth. That knowledge doesn't expire. It doesn't require batteries. It doesn't need a resupply chain. Nobody can take it from you, price gouge you for it, or manufacture a shortage of it. The survival industry has spent decades convincing you that knowledge is less valuable than products. That understanding is less useful than equipment, that you need them in order to be safe. Every time you learn a principle like this one, that lie gets smaller. There's a reason why the most effective cold weather shelter systems in military doctrine, indigenous tradition, and wilderness survival aren't built around expensive gear. They're built around understanding. The Romans understood it. The Mongolians understood it. The Siberian hunters understood it. Now you do too. And the next time we look at how they solved the problem that modern survival industry has made even more complicated than it needs to be, you're going to see that same pattern again. Ancient physics, cheap materials, and results that make the retail solution look like an expensive embarrassment.